section. Okay, so yeah, we've been talking about how throughout history, what kind of theories or philosophies people came up with to explain human fate, why things happen to some people or the way it does. It's from the book The Law of Cause and Effect That Shapes Fate from our website purelandschool.com. 3. Hedonism, agita. When we die, we become nothing. So whether we do good or evil, there is no reward in the next life. In India at that time, materialism, which asserted that man is nothing but a lump of matter, also appeared. An advocate of this view was Ajita. Ajita argued that human beings are a collection of the four elements, earth, water, fire, and wind, and that when they die, they are simply broken apart and nothing is left. He explains that there is no such thing as a soul other than the body, and that when we die, we will become nothing. So whether we do good or evil, there will be no consequence in the next life. Purana, introduced earlier, denied morality without any evidence, but Ajita, assuming materialism, reasoned why there is no reward or consequence for good or evil. Ajita said that there is no need for religion or morality because there is no consequence for any deeds and no afterlife. He was a hedonist who argued that we only need to live happily in this world. Today, there are still many materialists. For example, the assertion that the mind is an event in the brain is a kind of materialism. In the human brain, more than 100 billion neurons are connected in a mesh-like pattern to form a complex network. In response to materialists who claim that the mind is merely the workings of the brain, Eccles, who won the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in 1963 for his work on neurons, criticized scientific reductionism, which advocates that everything in the mental world can ultimately be explained by patterns of neuronal activity as a form of superstition. Eccles compared the brain to a computer and the mind to a programmer, arguing that the brain does not create the mind, but the mind uses the brain as a tool. And he claimed that our minds are immaterial, immortal entities that remain after our physical bodies perish. From Eccles' point of view, philosophers are so ignorant about the brain. Even if many such philosophers were to band together and advocate materialism, there would be little scientific basis for it. Eccles is not the only brain science giant who opposes materialism. Penfield, a world-renowned neurosurgeon, made a breakthrough in brain research in the 20th century by repeating a unique experiment in which he gave electrical stimulation directly to the exposed patient's brain and asked what he felt. It is said that no one has touched a living brain as much as Penfield. Penfield, who continued to conduct experiments that any neuroscientist would wish to do, believed that the mind can be explained by the brain, and he held to a position of materialism. In the end, however, he concluded that it is more reasonable to think of the brain and the mind as separate. It seems to me that it is absolutely impossible to explain the mind by the neural actions of the brain. Throughout my long research career, I have attempted to explain the mind with the brain. And now, in the final review of the evidence obtained so far, I am struck with wonder to discover that the theory that the man is composed of two basic elements seems more reasonable. So if the mind cannot be explained by the brain, where does it come from and where does it go? Penfield imagines that our minds have switched brains countless times, just like changing computers. Where the human mind comes from, no one knows, but the mind does indeed exist. The mind is tied to the function of certain mechanisms in the brain. And there is compelling evidence that for countless generations, the mind has been associated with the brain in this way in every human being, and that the character of the mind is passed on successively from one generation to the next. Okay, so up to here for today. Yeah, it's very important to meditate or contemplate on, yeah, the difference between our brain and our mind or heart. I think initially, yeah, it's not obvious, but actually, as we meditate on it, contemplate on it, we begin to see that there is a lower part of who we are, deeper part of who we are in the depth of consciousness, which is the unconscious mind. That mind, it's governing what comes to our brain, what we think, what we want to avoid, our aversions and likes. I think that's one sign of our spiritual progress. We begin to see that we understand impermanence, everything is so fleeting with our intellect, with our upper mind, which is the brain. That we understand. That's the beauty of having life as a human. But as we move forward on our spiritual journey, we begin to see the lower mind, which is totally unresponsive to the truth of impermanence. It doesn't get moved. Yeah. Yesterday we had someone in the meetup. I heard there were wildfires in Maui again now. So I was thinking maybe he came to the meetup to figure out, what is the value of life if everything is so fleeting and impermanent. So that's the reflection of the upper mind. But that's also the start of our spiritual journey. But it doesn't end there. We gain access to the deeper part of who we are, and that's how we can truly be liberated from suffering, from that depth. Yeah, so we will come back to this. Good job, everyone, for being here practicing together. So have a wonderful Tuesday. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.